Good day and welcome to Interface. I'm Kimberly Broderick. This is where we come face to face with issues plaguing society. Today, our guest this morning is Mrs. Donna Parchment Brown, the political ombudsman. It's a pleasure to have you, Mrs. Brown.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here with you, and may I take the opportunity to congratulate you, Kimberly, on your program, Interface.
Thank you.
I'm honored to be here so early in the life of the program. I hope it continues for a long time.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have you here. Now, we want to deal with the issues of the political code of conduct, the allegations of vote buying and dawn threats, and just about the political code of conduct and in its entirety, the anniversary service and so on. So let me begin. What is the political code of conduct?
I'm so happy to have the opportunity to talk with you in September, because the Agreement and Declaration on Political Conduct was signed in September 14 years ago. And of interest, I think, to everyone should be that this was signed in Gordon House between the major political parties, the Jamaica Labour Party and the People's National Party, the then party leaders, including Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition at the time. And really, the Agreement and Declaration on Political Conduct, otherwise called the Code, was part of an evolution of Jamaica's determination to improve our politics. We had come through a really terrible period of the 70s and 80s, and civil society and politicians had been engaged in talking about how, as citizens, we could create a democracy of which we could be proud. And it was felt that to do that, there would need to be some standards that the parties could agree to, which would then bind every political actor going forward. And so at this time, we are proud to say that Jamaica stands tall globally in having such standards for politics. And there are essentially 7 or 8 of them, and we can go into some detail into what these are.
All right. Yes, I do have the agreement, and yes, it says signed September 2005. Now, the first one, it says the People's National Party, the Jamaica Labour Party, and all other legitimate political parties in Jamaica must affirm their belief in the sanctity of human life and abhor taking human life or the violation of the person or anyone because of that person's political allegiance. And it goes on that I would say that aspect is for the personal aspect of the code.
In fact, yes, there are about 3 pages of preliminary points which set the tone for the code. In a sense, they're explaining who this binds, what are the underlying values that we are trying to put forward, and what are the things we hold dear. And recognizing also that this is a work in progress. And then we come to a point where we actually specify what the elements of the code will be. And it's important to say, and perhaps I should touch on that before we go any further, because both parties agreed that all political parties undertake appropriate action on any recommendation made by the political ombudsman. So we generally talk about the fact that the powers of the ombudsman as the office holder are limited in terms of sanctions. And this is now a concern. However, at the time of the signing of the code, the onus was on the leaders of the political parties to work with the ombudsman to ensure that these values which they had signed to would be respected, so that if the ombudsman got a complaint, did an investigation, made a recommendation, while the political party would not have to always agree with the recommendations of the ombudsman, they would treat it as something important and as far as possible do what was necessary to carry forward those recommendations. And then that put an onus on the ombudsman to be neutral, to be unbiased, to do good investigations, to use confidentiality or public speaking, depending on what was most appropriate, to work with the leaders of the political parties to resolve these issues. So, as we go forward, it's worth reinforcing and repeating to all the political actors, members of parliament, councillors, whether they're senators or they're elected officials, other party functionaries that this is their code.
Yes.
And I have the honor and privilege of helping them do what they have promised to do.
And I one of the second agreement is that all breaches of the code of political conduct will be investigated by the political ombudsman.
Yes. Of course, essentially what that means is that all complaints about breaches based on elsewhere in the law, it says the ombudsman must exercise their judgment as to whether there's enough here or not, the timing of the process and so on. But investigation must precede a determination of breach, because if you have decided it's a breach before you investigate, that can't be an unbiased investigation.
Yes.
Because you would have formed your judgment before you had done your inquiry or your investigation. And I think that's very important, you know. Occasionally, all of us may fall into error and feel we have arrived at a conclusion. But then afterwards, when we examine the thing carefully, it may not rise to a breach, but it may still be worthy of comment and worthy of correction, even though there may not be any particular penalty that would arise. But then coming out of all of this thinking and talking, they came up with, 7 specific things that the parties have agreed to, ranging from nonviolence to anti-political tribalism.
And the code of ethics.
And the very important code of ethics.
What stood out to me before we get to the 7 breaches, persons who intend to seek election to any office, referred to in paragraphs A, B, and C, which is political parties, the members of the House and the Senate, mayors and council. So persons who intend to seek place in that party, either of the parties, they should abide by the political code of conduct as well.
Well, people who seek to become a mayor, a councillor, an MP or such, yes, they are required to comply by the code. And frankly speaking, all of the officials and activists in a political party are expected to comply with the code, because if you look at the Political Ombudsman Interim Act, which establishes the office of the Political Ombudsman, it actually talks about investigating complaints that may affect the relationships between supporters of different political parties. So even supporters are contemplated as people to be protected under this peace architecture.
All right, so let me get into it. What are the kinds of breaches or allegations or suggestions that have been made to the office of the political ombudsman?
So we have complaints, we have breaches in and out of campaign and in and out of election time. It's been pretty interesting, I think, over the last few years, because we had national general elections early in 2016. Then we had national local government elections late in 2016. We had by-elections in 2017, 2018, and 2019. Some of these occasioned by the untimely passing of office holders. So it's been quite interesting, because in a way we have been in election mode for the entire period since early 2016, because some contest is coming or just finishing somewhere. And then this gets impacted by the continuing interest of the public through particularly social media, where there are ongoing comments on policy issues, on the activities of the political parties, as people who are supporters of or opposed to different groups express their voice in the media. So that, although not named specifically, that is the digital space as a space in which you have political conflict, has become in this era a very important area. So if we look at number 4 in the code, which is public utterances, which talks about party officials should not make statements which are inflammatory or likely to incite others to confrontation or to violence, that may be slanderous or libelous, or maybe malicious in reference to political actors, officials, or their families. with the growth of social media, perhaps the greatest invention of the modern age, certainly for me, social media is wonderful.
Yes.
My family is in touch all the time. You know, working on a family reunion, no, where are we doing it? On social media. It's wonderful. Every morning we're laughing and talking and sending love to one another. Well, social media also allows you to send something else to people. And so there's a lot of harm being done, what people would consider to be anonymously. Some people think that by putting a name or a pseudonym of some sort, a false name, on their post, that will protect them. The fact is that if we harm people, we have seen across the globe where young girls have committed suicide because of cyberbullying, and the perpetrators have been held guilty before the courts. We have seen where people who are on social media with atrocious messages, who had been accepted to Harvard University, found their acceptances pulled because of that. We have seen in Jamaica where defamation in the digital space has led to the court awarding as much as 16 million Jamaican dollars in damages to someone who has been harmed in the digital space.
Yes.
So people should not think that there's anonymity or there's lack of accountability. We at my office, at the Office of the Political Ombudsman, we are challenged because for these kinds of public utterances, and they're public because they're not just between two friends or, you know, family members. They're out there for anybody who wants to join in.
Yes.
We at the moment do not have the capacity to do the level of monitoring that's required. And it's not always clear whether the people who are speaking represent their political party or they simply represent an individual viewpoint. And this is where it's so important that the political parties today make it clear that they themselves are opposed to the use of social media for these purposes. In the same way they report what's said on the platform, which is very easy to deal with because traditional media normally has put that on the news, and I'm able to get that easily to work with. Here it's important for the political parties in the 21st century to equip themselves to handle this.
All right, I'm going to hold that out and we'll finish on the social media matter. We'll take our first break. Interface, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Interface. I'm Kimberly Broderick. Earlier before the break, we are speaking to the political ombudsman, Donna Parchment Brown. Mrs. Parchment Brown, before the break, we were speaking about social media and number 4 in the Code of Conduct of public utterances. Now, as a millennial, we rant, we say our mind, we speak on social media a lot. Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook gives us that platform. What for those who want to, you mentioned earlier about persons who get deferred from colleges just because something they posted on social media. What for those who actually want to be a part of the political scene?
Yes, well, of course, digital information lives forever. A mere delete on your phone does not kill. And also where it's been picked up by other people, it's been multiplied in front of your eyes without you realizing. So some of the loves or the likes can come back to haunt you. And I think, you know, I'm in the post-millennial age, of course, and our conversations would be in our groups of 5 and 10 and 15 and 20, which would mean that if you misspoke, it would be difficult for it to become viral. In the current age, if you misspeak out of malice, out of ignorance, it can go viral. And the person you intend or harm by doing that, that's one thing. But you yourself may be harmed because in the future people will say, that person said that, that person did that, is that what that person believes in? Yeah. So I think as beguiling as its space is, and we should use it heavily, we should not lose sight of our own values, our intelligence, and our respect for others. And be also aware that it is a space where others can harm us as easily as we harm them. And that's a lose-lose proposition.
Yes.
If a person intends to be a politician, then early in the day, they need to begin to build their personal brand. And the millennial brand is often conveyed through the digital space.
Yes.
So everyone needs to be aware of who they are, who they want to be, and how they want to be perceived, and not simply get off in the moment, in whatever it may be. A lot of times, in the past, you would say, if you're going to write somebody a letter when you're angry, go ahead and write the letter, but don't post it.
Yes.
Likewise, in the digital space, you can go ahead and write your post, but you don't have to press send until you're satisfied that that's the post you want to send. And I think that's where, where we have to find that balance, because sometimes we want an advantage, a political advantage, for example,
Yes.
and we support or we laugh at or we don't frown on something that is said or done by somebody who is a supporter. They may not do it in our name per se, but we are the beneficiary of that. We need, political actors need to say, look, I don't want to be a beneficiary of something that's so negative. I don't want my name to be associated with. I don't want my party to be associated with that. I don't want our youth leaders to be known in this way. So, for example, one of the things we're doing to mark the 14th anniversary of the Code is we'll be hosting a youth leaders forum. And that youth leaders forum is going to bring on people who are not actively in the party political process, but they are in many leadership spaces across the country. And we value leaders,
Yes.
whether they're active in politics or they're active in society. Everybody has a constituency that they can advise, support, educate. And we want to see some of these young leaders become political actors. And so we want to talk to them about the standards that exist for politics in Jamaica, how they think these standards that are embodied in the code could be better known and better enforced. Are we using social media enough to get to the coming generation? And are we using traditional media enough to get to those who are more comfortable in that space? Are we using a good mix
So in this
of what's
forum,
available?
in this forum, would they be able to make suggestions as to, I don't want to say improve the political code of conduct, but what they deem something important that should be added to it as well? They have that platform to do that.
Absolutely. Over the last year or so, I've really been doing a lot of listening through a number of different fora, because I have put forward and intend to put forward again to the political parties the need for certain reforms of the Political Ombudsman Interim Act and of the Code. Partly we have seen now since 2017 the amendments to the Representation of the People Act to do with campaign finance reform come into effect. And some of those reforms touch and concern some of these issues that we have. So maybe not so much something like public utterances, but something like bribery.
Yes.
So if we look at the amended legislation at Section 91, for example, it talks about bribery. And yet, when you have a conversation in the public space, which also the first code is really touching on bribery when it says candidates or others acting on behalf of candidates must not use funds derived from any source, public or private, to improperly influence electoral choices.
Yes.
That's called bribery somewhere else. Yet in the general discourse, whether in all media and in other places, there is a sense of fatalism around the inevitability of bribery as part of our political process. I reject that. I completely reject the idea that bribery is so embedded in the Jamaican psyche that we will not act unless we are paid, and that we will not frown on those who pay to get us to act. And I think the cynicism of saying, take their money and vote how you want, is equally to be condemned.
Yes.
And so for young people growing up in this era, so if you're now 25 years old, maybe it's only in the last 3 or 4 years that you've been really involved
Yes.
and interested in what's going on. And what you've been hearing is that some of these behaviors are normal. And so we are shaping the younger generation to see this bad behavior as not bad behavior, but just par for the course. And I really want to hear young people repudiate that. Now, when we have the forum, I don't know what the young people will say.
Yes.
But my impression is that these are young people who have put themselves out there with ideas to serve. And I look forward to learning from them, both in terms of what reforms we may need, but also how to better engage them and their peers, while we are also trying to better engage every other demographic in society. But I'm targeting each demographic to be able to have an office that properly responds.
All right, so while we're on the topic of bribery, the PNP's presidential election has just gone on Saturday, and there were allegations of vote buying and Don threats made by Dons. Your office received reports on that. Can you tell us more about it?
Yes, we first became aware of these problems through the traditional media on the news, and later through a letter from a civil society leader, NIA, regarding these concerns, and of course in different spaces on social media. These were really on the cusp of the election, and in life, timing is everything.
Yes.
Our office doesn't want to be used to carry forward any agenda other than the best interest of the public and Jamaicans in general. So whenever I receive a complaint, depending on how quickly I can verify some elements of it, depending on how easily I can reach out to those who are making the allegations, depending on the egregiousness of the allegations, and depending on what else is going on at the time, I make decisions as to whether I contact via social media, such as WhatsApp, the people involved to say this is a concern, or whether I make a statement in the media that this is serious and dangerous and needs to stop, or whether I do some quiet investigation before determining who it is that I should call in or write to move the matter forward. In all of this, I also have to look at whether my mandate gives me the authority to call in persons, or whether it is the goodwill of my office that I will be expending to ask persons to look at what I'm saying. So I make that distinction because the code and the law primarily are focused on contests between political parties, not within political parties. However, there is the issue that the people within political parties may have signed this code, which should bind them all the time. Like, I'm a public figure 24/7.
Yes.
Wherever I am, people know I'm the ombudsman, and my conduct there can be called out by anyone at any time. And in that spirit, if you're a parliamentarian or a councillor or otherwise an official of a political party, your party has signed the code to say that you believe in these values. And so we expect that you believe in those values, whether it's just in your house or you're in the wider space in other people's house. So looking at those two sides, I would say the jury is out on whether I have the mandate and authority to compel participation of members of a political party in relation to matters within their political party. However, I don't think there is also the question of, by merely being a public official, and some of these who are, some of the allegations are around people who have signed the code of conduct, does that bind you all the time?
All right. On the issue of vote buying, we'll get some more details on that. Stay tuned. We'll take another break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Interface, here with the political ombudsman, Donna Parchment Brown. earlier before the break, we were addressing issues of bribery and the allegations made to the office of the political ombudsman. What specifically were the allegations?
Right, so there are two allegations in the public domain. One from one team within the party was of vote buying, and the other allegation was of intimidation through the use of dons. So it seems that there were two allegations on the very eve of the election. You know, it brought to mind the situation in elections in a neighboring country when a public official came out to speak about a candidate on the cusp of the election. And there are those who feel that the candidate speaking at that, the public official speaking at that time actually was like putting their finger on the scale in favor of one group or the other. Now, my office must do no harm. Whenever we intervene, it should improve the situation. Our objective is around the larger body politic. As at this time, neither of the groups who made those allegations have come to me or written to me. I understand there's an internal monitoring committee.
Yes.
And there are other internal processes that are at work, potentially to address these and other matters. I am aware also that the code does provide, the eighth code is really about the code of ethics. And it encourages efforts within organizations where there are conflicts. So within the political party or the parties in conflict with one another, to use some mechanism to try and talk through or work through some of these matters before they make a complaint. But whether they do that or not does not bar me from acting if I consider it to be an appropriate situation to act. But I must think about the timing and the content.
Okay.
I have not made a decision beyond conducting an inquiry. I have not made a decision that I will conduct an investigation. And I know there are a few people out there who are drawing different conclusions about why I have not come out and said, I am investigating. And I hope what we have discussed has helped them to better understand. We all should be familiar with the code. We all should be familiar with the law. Not every allegation can be investigated. And a decision about investigating doesn't have to come quickly. It has to be timely. In other words, it has to be relevant. But the fact that, say, the elections are over does not mean that it's still not important. I think people have also raised issues about other situations where I've investigated. And I think both political party leadership will tell you that I have been responsive to them, and I have investigated complaints on both sides of the major political contests, the two main registered parties. On that, some of the times it's pretty obvious at the beginning that if you don't say something quickly, a situation is going to deteriorate and harm will be done to the public.
Yes.
In this case, there was no time to speak with those who were involved on the matter before they were ready to make a decision. I'm hoping within the coming week, certainly over the next 5 to 10 days, to make a determination as to whether an investigation is necessary or not. And also if a public statement regarding this and related matters would be necessary at this time.
Yes, because I remember one of the articles said you were not investigating at this time.
Right.
So that could have explained that it would be at a later time. As you rightfully said, even though the election is over, there is time, there is room to address it. So what are other allegations you've received before between the two major political parties? I know we, especially on Twitter, we see former MPs, former party members or persons who were in the leadership. They are very vocal on Twitter.
Really?
Have you received those allegations as well?
In the late last year, coming out of the debate around the states of emergency,
Yes.
I received a couple of complaints which were addressed, and they were addressed in large measure by interaction with those who had posted these messages.
Yes.
And what was interesting for me is that you might have had an initial denial of action or an initial denial of the impact of the action. But in engaging with the persons who were involved, there was a high degree of regret for having posted these messages, which they had thought were simply humorous, not harmful, didn't matter so much.
Yeah.
And they still respected the side that they were posting against. And so in a way they saw it as political jousting, while maybe it really went to the reputation of the organizations. Yeah. And I've had later on within the electoral space some really egregious posts, which I have shared some of those with the Jamaica Constabulary Force Cyber Security Section, on the premise that the capability to identify persons who had made these truly defamatory and harmful statements against political actors could have been identified, and I would have been able to do something about that. Unfortunately, those resources don't seem to be, I've not gotten a positive response to say, we have identified these 10 people, and this is how you can go ahead and contact them. There's also been a problem of for example, seeing motor vehicles that were being used in a political way, which would have breached the law and would have gone into the space called bribery. And in trying to get that information from the authorities who have control of the motor vehicle licenses, I've not been able to get that.
Okay.
And so to be able to act and engage with those people has been very difficult. The public utterances on the platforms, those have been easier. You would have been aware that certainly this year there were 3 major events involving young spokespeople from the People's National Party.
Yes.
And we engaged very, very, very heavily on these issues, and they have issued apologies for their utterances. And these are apologies that were not just, off the top of their heads. I think maybe initially they said something to show their regret, but later on they did a second step to really, delve down into why they regretted and why that was not a reflection of who they were.
Okay.
In earlier periods, I've had that same positive interaction with representatives of the other parties, some of whom were parliamentarians, who made utterances. Some of them might even be characterized as unthinking, off the cuff.
Yes.
And not weighing the implications of what they were saying. And I found, and this is something I need to commend the political parties on, is that when I engage with them, although there may be an initial resistance or an initial sense of hurt or embarrassment, by and large I've dealt with reasonable people, decent Jamaicans who want to hold their own reputations, and who also, while they may be concerned about an issue
Yes.
with another political party, their intention is not really to destroy individuals, to bring them into disrepute and their families. Often these are disagreements that are framed and stated in language that is not as reflective or as thoughtful as it needs to be. So we end up conveying the insult and not the message.
Yes.
And this is the same thing, whether you're on a platform or you're on social media or in some other space, that, we have got to be mindful. Mindfulness is an important part of political leadership.
True. It really is. Because when you see persons, and these are persons who hold leadership positions, when you see them sharing, when you see them saying stuff, and I remember some of the responses from young people to them, some were saying, you're wrong to have tweeted that, you're wrong to have said this, because it will implicate not only your political life, but your personal life as well. And to see that's something I took away from it, to see that young people were saying, no, that was wrong. We don't agree with what you say, either from either side of the spectrum, both from either side of the political party saying, no, we don't agree with this. You shouldn't have said this. But after issuing the apology, I believe they understood where
Yes.
they went wrong.
Yes.
And they did just that.
Yes. I think I'm very encouraged by what you have just said, because when we're talking about young people, there are a lot of people out there who are posting and writing things. They're not young people.
Yes.
And so it's good that the really young people, that is the under 30s, are saying, no, I don't like that. I used to respect you before. I liked you better when I could admire you.
Yes.
You know, because, yes, when we're in that space, we want to say and do what we can. But I don't want to, I don't think any young person wants to post something that if their parent were to come upon it by accident, they would have to deny that it's them. Right? And for most young people, the people who are already in parliament or already in office as councillors, they're their seniors. And they want to look up to and admire these people. And I think in some ways we have lost our innocence. And therefore we forget that young people want to be able to laugh and smile and admire, not just cuss and praise.
That's true. Let's take it to number 7, the political tribalism.
Yes.
That's very important.
Yes.
It says the parties eschew the practice of political tribalism rooted in coercion, intimidation, or violence of any kind, and the parties commit themselves to removing any structures and resisting the development of any behavioral, cultural, social, or organizational practices which reinforce political tribalism.
Yes. Here we are in, what's the year? 2019. And this was written in 2005.
Yes.
And it came out of the kind of tribalism that saw a lot of political violence. We have had a lot of reform to electoral laws, and that has, to a great extent, reduced the impact of tribalism on election results.
Yes.
But it has not as much reduced the impact on the quality of life for people and the ability of persons to hold and express their political views freely.
Yes.
The very fact that the notion of intimidation by dons would have come up in a discussion in 2019, particularly in the internal election, tells you that there is reality out there, that across the spectrum there are people who hold undue influence, who do not represent the highest values and morals of Jamaican society. So a lot of what we call tribalism, it relates to things like, let us say there is a sum of money to be spent by the state across constituencies. It should either be that it's equally divided across the constituencies, or it is divided based on specific identified needs in a constituency, which may lead to one getting more or one getting less. It should not relate to who the MP is.
Yes.
It should not relate to whether you represent a political party or you hold a particular office within a party. It should be based on what the demographics and the social and developmental needs of that constituency would dictate. This should also relate to distribution of other assets like roadworks, water projects, or any such activity. The other question is, when we look at public policy issues, tribalism means that all voices can contend. Ideas should come from everywhere, and that while people may be seeking political advantage by putting their voices out there, if the suggestions are actually valuable, then there should be a way that they become incorporated in the way the country is run. Likewise, in geographic spaces, people should not feel unsafe or insecure, or that decisions about any kind of suppressive action or anything of that nature is made based on who they support or do not support. And let's remember, I think people think of garrisons as whole constituencies.
Yes.
But the votes in elections, nobody wins by more than 4,000 votes or 5,000 votes. So a little area of 8,000 people can be a garrison and be suppressed or impacted and still have an impact on outturn.
All right, we do want to hear more about this political tribalism. We'll take another break. Interface will be right back. Welcome back to Interface. I'm here with the political ombudsman, Donna Parchment Brown. Earlier before the break, we were addressing number 7 on the Code of Conduct, political tribalism. Tell us more on that.
Yes, politics is so exciting. I mean, I love politics, and I love being in a position where I don't have to have a political point of view, but really recognize that politics is how we make decisions to arrive at actions that will benefit the citizens of a country and move them forward. So engaging the citizenry of all ages and all demographics in the political process is very important. There will be, as you have said, among the different groups, there will be a percentage that have no political party loyalty.
Yes.
Let's be clear, loyalty is very different from tribalism.
Okay.
Tribalism is when the thing is so perverse that others are prevented from enjoying the benefits of their taxes and their benefits of their citizenry, or it is corruption, in fact. So an advantage is given to one group based on their political view, or the other group eats salt through a wooden spoon because of their political view.
Yes.
Right? So, but when we talk about tribalism, we need to distinguish it from loyalty. If you have been operating in the political space as a citizen for 10 or 15 years, you would have formed views about who you trust, who you don't trust, who you like, whose policies you like, whose policies you don't like.
Yes.
And that can be a sincere belief that you're loyal to, but that doesn't mean that you're the enemy of the other group or you try to stop them. Tribalism is a disease. That is corruption. That is when somebody intentionally and wrongfully uses their power or uses resources to suppress or deny people from exercising their rights, or provides advantages to one group that is not deserved by any particular need or asset. So what we want to do is see tribalism as a negative part of the culture. So young people who are on social media are in fact finding themselves in a tribal space sometimes.
Yes.
Unintentionally. They're just in a space and then they find themselves in a conversation. So to go back to defamation in the digital space, for example, tied into political tribalism.
Yes.
If you see a post and there's a thread and you laugh, or you say, go there,
or you
repost, or you share, or whatever. In fact, what you have done now is that you have endorsed the initial comment. And you are now the publisher of that comment. So you may not see yourself as tribal. You say, no, man, young people, we just vote out this one and vote out that one, and we do what we want. But then before you get to voting, have you done something that was unthinking or self-serving or just idle, that puts you in jeopardy because you have actually adopted something that might be libelous or malicious or inciting to violence? And those are some of the characters or characteristics of political tribalism in the modern age. It's not all about a gunman standing at the top of the road and nobody can come out. Yes, it's also about dipping people's finger in ink before. It's paying people and preventing them from coming out. It's paying people, hard on the polling station, or appearing to pay people. And a lot of these things are not provable. So one of my anxieties has been that since the report of the committee on the events of 2010 in Western Kingston, and one of the big outcomes of that report was, apart from compensating people who are damaged and talking about police and military action, it talked about the institutionalization of tribalism and the need for Jamaica to make a decision that it will undo the machinery of tribalism. what we have done, we have made some of the original machinery irrelevant
Yes.
because of changes in the law. But we have kept some of it on and put it into new clothes. So it's appearing in a different way from the way it did 30 years ago. But the harm it does, maybe people are not being killed, but people may be being deprived of their right to participate in society fully. And for me, a big part of this is the political parties need to be very clear. We do not, and state it. It's not enough to say everybody no, we don't. They have to state it from their platforms. They have to write it in their press releases. They need to say, my party and myself as the individual do not support any actions which would reduce the right of any other Jamaican to participate fully and freely in society. That anyone who appears to be doing in my name any act which could be construed to be tribal, in that it is only related to benefits for people of my party,
Yes.
and harm for people of the other party, that the leaders, the hierarchy, the elected officials, the parliamentarians and councillors, the delegates and others need to be on an ongoing basis seeing a Jamaica where it doesn't matter who you vote for,
Yes.
that they will persuade you to vote based on ideas, based on their commitment to provide certain services, based on a sense of regret about where they have gone wrong in the past. Because you see, with less than 50% turnout for elections, the La Pop survey has shown that a large percentage of Jamaican people feel that politicians can't be trusted.
Yes.
Now, I don't share that view. I think most of our politicians can be trusted. I think most of our politicians want to do good for Jamaica. I think in the old days we used to have people saying prayers in church for politicians. We should continue to send them good and positive energy. We should continue to speak to them respectfully. We should continue to remember that they have parents, spouses, family members.
Yes.
And they too must remember that we want to respect, honor, and trust them. And it's a work that has to be done. And that is a job that the Office of the Political Ombudsman, by intervening when there are issues, by helping them handle complaints about breaches, can help to reassure the public that along with the Electoral Commission and other institutions, that Jamaica is a decent country, fit to live in, led by people who believe in the values of the institutions they have established. So you have the Office of the Political Ombudsman that's established. But if you look at it, it's only under Section 22 that we can impose any sanctions.
Yes.
And the reason it's only under Section 22 is because the optimistic leaders felt that they themselves were so committed to these values that they would be my strong right hand.
So do you believe young people are coming out, they're getting enumerated, they're becoming more a part of the political process?
I sincerely hope so. You know, I've been doing a program called Conversations with Young Jamaicans, going around to high schools and colleges and talking about democracy, the work of the office, and related matters.
Yes.
And one of the things I've been encouraging them, and I hope others will join me in this, is to say, when you hit your 18th birthday, go out with your friends, party, do what you have to do, be nice, enjoy your ice cream, and then you and your other 18-year-old friends go down to the electoral office and get yourself registered. And to be, I don't want to be cynical, but I'll say, worst case is that you have a good national ID. Best case is, on the day of the election, if you want to have a say, you can. No point in just talking,
I've always been a believer of that.
and not having the capability to actually talk in a way that makes a difference. You know, the country belongs to all of us, every demographic. It belongs to grandmothers. It belongs to the newborn baby in the womb. It belongs to all of us. But some of us have the privilege, once we hit 18, of being able to actually have a voice.
To be the difference, to
Yes.
share that view. I've always been a a believer of that. You have a voice, you always have a right to vote, so it's your job.
Yes. Be informed and then act.
And then act. All right, so tell me more about the Political Code of Conduct anniversary next week.
Yes. So we try to make the Code of Conduct anniversary something,
Yes.
that gets some public attention, because I think most times people respond to its existence only when there's a problem. So this is when there's, there seem always to be problems, but we're going to hold a forum with invited delegates, and it's a youth leaders forum.
Yes.
And we're bringing in young people. Some of them have been youth parliamentarians, some have been youth mayors, some have been in the Prefects Association, Sixth Form Association. They may have been elected as president of guilds at the different universities, and so on. And we believe these are the persons who in another 5 to 10 years are probably going to run for office as councillors or as parliamentarians.
Would this be at the beginning of the week?
Well, we're going to do 2 activities for the week. The other one is an interview with GIS, which is going to look at a number of these issues that can go out. And we're just going to do this one major event. Major forum of youth leaders. And they each have constituencies that they serve.
Yes.
And so we hope they will share with their constituencies some of these ideas that they have exchanged at the table. And we hope that they will be available to us and to the major political parties as resources to help them think through. Political parties work through their members, but they serve those who are not their members.
Yes.
So it's important for them also to hear the voices of those who are not their members. Last year we had a major conference up at the Faculty of Law of the UWI.
Yes.
And we're grateful for the coverage that was provided. I think it generated a lot of interest, a lot of discussion. This year we really want to zone in, because we need some recommendations from young people. Elections will be constitutionally due by February 2021.
Yes.
That doesn't give us a lot of time to talk about campaigns. Are we going to be okay with flags being put up in communities for the campaigns, or do we expect the political parties in the 21st century to be more modern? How are the platforms going to be managed? When are they going to put out information that can be debated, not just between candidates, but also debated in communities, so that people can be engaged in what is happening? How are they going to represent the voice of students, of young workers, not just party functionaries? So we're hoping to get a lot of suggestions from the young people. How can our office deepen the public's engagement in the idea that Jamaica has standards for politics, and that they have the duty to encourage the political actors to live by the standards and to respectfully call them out when they fail to live up to the agreed standards?
I wish you all the best, and I do hope all the young people will come out to that forum. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for Interface today. Thank you to my guest, the political ombudsman, Donna Parchment Brown. Thanks to my editorial and production teams. I'm Kimberly Broderick, wishing you pleasant viewing.
Thank you.